Lovely. Great. And a very warm welcome to today's Live Well live webinar. We are talking all about emotional eating today, which is such a huge subject, and we're just going to touch the surface probably. Just for the sake of everyone who knows, welcome for the first time. If you're here for the first time, we're going to run a poll just to see if you've been with us before, and we'll do that shortly. But a very warm welcome. So we run these webinars every week as a way of supporting you all on your weight loss journeys. It's very much about you bringing your questions as much as anything else. We have a topic for each webinar each week, and it really is about bringing your attention to some of the important areas to think about when you're on these weight loss journeys, because we know that actually it's quite complex, and for many people there are certain areas that they need to put more effort into than others. So stress and sleep management, all of those factors that we seldom hear about on that whole weight loss journey, and we feel it's really important to talk to you about. So if you do have any questions, or if you've brought any questions with you already, or any questions come up for you in today's webinar, please feel free to ask them. And the best place to put them for us is actually if you can put them into the Q&A box. That really helps us to find your questions. If you have any very medically orientated questions, or any questions that we can't legally answer outside the sort of constructs of a webinar, the webinar information is very generic. If there's something that's very specific to you medically, we'll give you some advice as to where to seek that advice from, because we want everyone to be safe in this arena. And just to introduce myself, I'm Ruth Taylor. I'm the nutritionist with the Boots Online Doctor Service, part of the lifestyle medicine team, and very much part of the webinar team. And we're really thrilled to be welcoming today to the team Megha. So Megha, please do tell us a little bit about yourself, and please introduce yourself. Very warm.
Hi, thanks, Ruth. I'm really excited and happy to be invited today. My name's Dr. Megha Pancholi. I'm a GP, first of all, been a GP for around 11 years. In terms of Boots Online Doctor, I'm one of the lead mental health GPs. And specifically, I've been working on looking at how we can support patients who have a history of emotional eating and binge eating. I know we're not using that term here, but we are looking at patients with that diagnosis. So I've got a lot of personal and professional experience with this topic, and I think it's really important that we talk about that today. And we might just be touching the surface, but hopefully it can inspire a lot of people to talk more about it and get help if needed.
It's such an important subject, isn't it? I'm going to
Absolutely.
end the poll. So thank you so much to those of you who've taken part in that. There's no drama if you haven't had an opportunity to. This is completely anonymous. And just to let you know, there is only one other poll which we'll be sharing with you in a minute. But it really is all about you today. We want this to be something that's helpful to you on your journeys. So, oh, thank you. That's just popped back up on my screen. Um, let's see. So I think exactly what you were saying when we were talking about this the other day, Megha, that, for many people at any point in life, there can be a time when we become quite emotionally connected to our food. And this is more than physical hunger. This is about emotional hunger. And I think it's really beginning to be recognised that mental and emotional health can play a significant role in the development of being overweight and becoming obese. And it's not just as simple as about food, it's not about calories in, calories out. And it isn't just about how much we move our bodies. There's so much more to this story than just those simple things. And we can really underplay the importance of our emotions. We know that struggles with our managing emotions and perhaps something called emotional dysregulation, and experiencing a lot of negative emotions can lead to a greater risk of becoming overweight or obese, and for those problems not just to disappear simply. And we know that sometimes people have difficulty regulating their emotions. For example, calming down when they're upset or handling stress constructively. And this can lead them to become emotional eaters. And this is what we want to talk about today. It's such an important term. It's such an important area that we seldom talk about. It's almost like a secret in itself that we have a propensity to emotional eating, or that that's something that happens for us. And emotions are variable, so they can change from day to day, they can change from hour to hour, and food can become almost like a coping mechanism in life. And negative emotions such as stress, anger, boredom, loneliness can often trigger that sort of whole emotional eating. So if this is relevant to you, you absolutely are not alone. We don't want you to overshare anything that you're not comfortable with, but I hope that just bringing this subject to everyone's attention is going to be some form of help. But Mega, any thoughts around that?
I think you started that perfectly. I think what the key is, I'm whether it's diagnosed or not, I think most people have some sort of emotional attachment to food from childhood or adulthood, and that takes place in lots of different ways, which we'll go into detail later. I think a key thing you mentioned is shame and the kind of perceived feelings around that. There's a lots of negative emotions, as you've mentioned here. There's lots of shame and secretive behavior around it. And I think that can obviously lead to more negative emotions and the cycle that we're going to talk about more. So sharing, speaking about it, knowing that you're not alone, is really helpful in breaking that and moving forward. But I think just understanding that this is far more common than you think it is the key to start.
Yeah, I think just knowing that you're not alone is really
100%.
important, isn't it? So you're going to talk us through the difference between emotional and physical hunger. This is quite difficult to wrap our heads around, so I'm really glad you're talking about this.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I think hunger, you think, oh God, it's so obvious here. So physical hunger, I'll just talk through first. Comes on, quite gradually, builds up quite gradually over time. It's a hunger. You're open to a variety of foods. Your body is hungry. You need nutrients. It's not as if it's, oh, I'm craving this particular food or I need this particular type of food. Um, Patient. So as I mentioned it before, comes on gradually rather than immediately need something now. And it occurs after not eating for a while. So we've got this, conditioned breakfast, lunch, dinner, but some people may not need these meals, but we know that if you haven't eaten for a good few hours, then your body is requiring nutrients, and that kind of makes sense, if you like. And satisfies without guilt. Body has a physical reaction. It needs nutrients. There's a trigger to the brain. You eat something and you feel like you've kind of dealt with that. An emotional hunger. So this is, as Ruth said, a big topic to get round. But if you think about it, it can be in response to any kind of trigger. Sometimes there isn't a trigger at all, with all these things like with mental health conditions. It comes on all of a sudden. You feel like, oh, I just need to have X food or this just happens, craving specific comfort foods. So I'm not sure if the sort of dopamine rush and thing we're going to talk about a bit later, but there are certain foods which are proven that when we are feeling low or feeling stressed, we crave sugary foods, we crave carbohydrate-rich foods, fried foods, foods which are comforting, whether there's a childhood comfort there or whether there's a comfort from just having the sugar, which gives you that rush and that dopamine hit. Urgent, as I mentioned, it's something that in response to something, you need it there and then, you can't stop thinking about it. And you need to have that food to kind of just to dull those sort of triggers in the brain. Unrelated to last meal, so you may have had a nutritionally balanced meal, and you know that you've got enough calories and your nutrients there. However, it might be sort of minutes after eating that your body isn't hungry. However, this hunger is still there. This hole is still there that needs to be filled. And I think the key here is guilt. So mainly to guilt, you feel like you've done something that you shouldn't have done. Now, these aren't feelings that we're going to talk about that you should be having. However, if you are feeling that this is the type of feeling you're having after eating, then this is more suggestive of an emotional hunger that you feel rather than a physical. That's just very high level. Ruth, is there anything else you want to sort of come in there at the moment?
Yeah, just one thing you mentioned is you sort of like alluded it. Yeah, I think there was sort of something you said that made me feel that people might feel a little bit anxious about as sort of like alluding it to it potentially being a mental health issue. So I don't
Okay.
think you're suggesting for a minute that people have got a mental health condition, but
Yeah.
perhaps it's more about their emotional regulation. Is that what you meant by?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we'll talk at the end about the mental health condition. Sorry, that's my background, so that I was just talking about that. But it's just emotions up and down throughout the day and stressful trigger might have happened or something to make you feel a bit overwhelmed. Something's happened at home, something's happened at work. So it's in sort of response to that. And as we said, urgent, sudden, all of a sudden. It's like a coping mechanism, if you like, and that can happen every day, or that can happen sort of in whenever this emotional triggers happen. So that's sort of the that's why it's difficult because sometimes it can only happen at certain times, and there's no predictability here. But it's what triggers it, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I'm just sort of thinking, I'm reflecting back on some of the questions we've been asked over the last few months in webinars, and people sort of saying they always get hungry at a certain time, or,
Mm.
they always want to eat, something, even though they're not hungry. So it makes absolute sense. What you're saying makes absolute sense. So, yeah, I think that's really helpful. And thanks for clarifying. So, I'm sure we'll pick up on these points. But if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. We're here to 100% support you. Yeah, and I think this is really important. You're absolutely not alone with this. Anyone, absolutely anyone can be affected. It can affect any age group, any gender, any background. People who are suffering from chronic stress or maybe have had a history of trauma in their childhood can really bring this forward into their adulthood as well, without even necessarily being aware that that is what is going on beneath the surface. And I think that that's it. It's only when we start unpicking our own behaviors that we can perhaps start to see those patterns. It can also be people who've got emotional sort of really find it very difficult to regulate their emotions. And I think that was what you were talking about when you were talking just now, Mega, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's awareness as well. I think a lot
Yeah.
of these, we're going to talk about sort of rituals, and I think a lot of this is if we don't stop and think about it, we don't know. And I think being aware alone, and I can see in the comments as well, it's just you just sometimes it can be so isolating when you're feeling like this, and whether that is y- absolutely. And I think this is the key of this slide. I'll talk more in detail about the rituals and stuff later, I think.
So yeah,
Yeah,
somebody's just said thank you so much for sharing as well, because
absolutely.
appreciate how it's actually really helpful sometimes to share, isn't it? And actually just
Mm.
to be honest to other people, yeah, this does affect me. And actually, when I'm feeling lonely, I will reach for a packet of crisps or a bar of chocolate. You might intend to only have one square, and then suddenly the whole bar's gone before you know it. And people who are suffering with anxiety or depression can often find that they are in this situation unwittingly through no fault of their own. It isn't something you've done wrong. It is just a really tricky situation that you can find yourself in, and this cycle just perpetuates. And often it can be associated with people who are really unhappy with their bodies or have had this history of losing weight, regaining weight. So I think it's sort of like why it's such an important topic to bring to this arena, really. Yeah. So, Mega, over to you.
Yeah. So signs of emotional eating. So we've just written a few things here, but we can have a chat. So repeated regain after successful loss. I think this is so common, and majority of people here may be able to sort of identify with this is yo-yo dieting, as we say, you're successful and then you regain the weight again. And this is sort of, is there something else going on here that's leading to this weight going on there and addressing the behaviors? So difficulty losing weight consistently, linking to the first topic. Now, as with, there's obviously loads of these webinars talking about lifestyle changes, and I think in my experience, people understand what they need to do in terms of adjusting their diet, increasing their exercise, but there clearly is something else going on. And this is where we think about emotional eating, that look, we're all people, there's lots of information out there, despite doing all of these lifestyle changes, still finding yourself, feeling this emotional hunger and reaching for foods that you maybe are aware that you shouldn't be eating, which is obviously leading to weight gain. And that is sort of perpetuating the cycle of the repeated weight gain after successful loss. Frequently feeling overly full. Um, Again, emotional eating versus physical, emotional hunger versus physical hunger. What are we trying to fill here? What void are we trying to fill? Is it the emotional feeling that you're getting, and the comfort that you're getting from these foods, which is an actual chemical reaction that happens. As we mentioned, Ruth, you get a dopamine hit, you get the comforting feeling from feeling full, but feeling overly full, overdoing it. No appetite for real or nutritious food. If patients usually say they find themselves snacking or grazing throughout the day, rather than having a balanced meal, which we know they're going to get their calories and their nutrients from. Again, is this something that patients are feeling an emotional hunger rather than a physical hunger of having a meal and then being done? Using food to manage emotional crises. I mean, this is the crux of it, isn't it? This is the key. So this is a learned behavior, or most likely subconscious, that this is something that we know that gives comfort and relief to patients during emotional and highly stressful times. And it does. And you do have patients who have such individual moments and periods. And I think a few of our patients have been really open and honest in the chat. So thank you for that, and giving sort of your own experience. And these foods give you comfort in that moment. And so that is the coping mechanism rather than sort of other things that we'll talk about. So these are just some of the signs. If there's anything else you want to add in at this point, Ruth.
Yeah, no, I think you've covered it nicely. I think it is just all of those emotional conflicts that can be going on in the background for you. And it is something that, because it's not recognized or talked about, if you are, this may be, somebody in the chat box is just honestly, telling us their stories. And thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
Somebody is saying that they found out when they were 60 that
Mm.
they've been eating emotionally since childhood. And actually, I think you're not alone. It's really, really helpful to share that, because there will be other people in the audience who perhaps haven't even thought about whether this is relevant to them. And it may be just dipping your toe in the water and thinking, okay, is there something going on here that's relevant to me? And we're going to talk about how to seek help if that is relevant for you. It may be that actually just getting this awareness and bringing your attention to this subject is going to be the starting point in changing your relationship with food. And let's not kid ourselves, this can be really tough. Getting out of these cycles of behavior isn't an overnight thing, is it, Mega? So we're going to talk about this a little bit more.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's just really
Yeah.
helpful. Do you want to take us through this sort of emotional eating cycle?
Yeah, I think most people will identify with this, but I think it's really important that we go through this just to in our heads understand what's going on. So emotional trigger, I think most people can understand what that is, whether that's something happened at work, at home, personal life, something's happened which has triggered me and I'm feeling stressed and upset and anxious. And this leads to a craving. I'm going to say certain foods. I apologize if that's triggering to people, but for me, it's salty, crispy things. So I'm like, oh, I need to have like a family pack of crisps or something just to sit down on the couch and just devour. That craving comes in someone's head. Ritual. I think ritual is key here. So what we mean by ritual is kind of like a learned behavior that we have. So when something happens. What I need to do is go and get a packet of crisps, chocolate. I need to get this takeaway. I need to have this. I need to get changed into certain clothes. I need to sit down in a certain space, and I'm just going to eat, and I'm going to maybe watch something at the same time. But it's a pattern of behaviors that bring comfort, and something that's repeated, and it's kind of the subconscious way that somebody says, that's my management, that's my technique. And then that ritual leads to a reward. As I said, there is science here. So this does lead to a short-term dopamine hit, serotonin hits. You feel happy, you feel comforted, you feel safe, you feel like, oh, you know, that was great. Like, I feel better. I know what I need to do. I don't feel stressed. I don't feel anxious for the moment anymore. However, then the guilt creeps in because, whether you feel too full or whether you feel you have worries about your weight, and you feel like, hang on, this maybe wasn't a healthy response here. Maybe there's something else going on. I'm numbing, I'm masking, I'm not feeling good. And the guilt sets in, and the guilt is a really, really important part of this cycle, which then leads you to getting triggered again. You're feeling guilty, you're feeling upset, you're feeling, if for this webinar purposes, you've been on a weight loss journey, however, something's happened, and you've kind of set off the cycle again. And I think I just want to comment about the sort of all or nothing part here, because we do find very commonly patients who are on a weight loss journey maybe have a blip and kind of think, oh God, it's happened now. I've indulged my ritual. I just might as well carry on and go, rather than sort of stopping it there and say, hang on, we're human. We're not robots. We don't just say, okay, I'm going to stop this now. And kind of having that compassion for yourself, and just being kind to yourself and say, I've had a blip this time. However, next time I may be able to sort of regulate better. But that's kind of just a high level going of the cycle. Hopefully that sort of makes sense as to what's going on inside your brain, inside our brains, whenever emotional eating is involved. Is there something else you want to enter now, Eve?
It's really powerful. And, I think if you're recognizing these patterns, what we want for you today is just to have that awareness that maybe this you are in, or maybe even you already knew that, but just maybe a reminder of how to move away from this pattern. And it's not going to be a quick overnight fix. So let's have a look at the sort of overcoming emotional eating. This is the theory, and the practice is much harder than just talking through a slide on a webinar. The practice means turning up for yourself every day and really bringing attention to your behavior and recognizing the patterns. So, first of all, start. If this is something that is affecting you, and we've had a lot of sharing, thank you so much in the chat box. It is food, it can be alcohol. Some people are messaging us privately, so we're not going to read out the responses. If you can see them, that's because people want you to see what they've written. It may be that they've written to us individually or as a bunch of hosts. So yeah, first of all, start by recognizing that perhaps there's a pattern behind your weight regain. Is there something that's sort of holding you back? Is there something that happens for you? You lose weight, but you can't keep it off, or you find that you fall into this pattern that Mega was talking about, the sort of like the guilt, the being triggered cycle, the overeating, the feeling maybe overfull and uncomfortable, all of those things. If you recognize that in yourself, then the first step is to recognize that this is something that potentially is happening for you. We really want you to think about not blaming yourself. This is just another thing. It's learned behavior. It's very much how you have had to show up for yourself to soothe yourself. It's your learned experience for however many years you've done this. It's sort of just what you have learned to do. And actually, with all habits, it's just another habit you've gotten into the habit of and can be unpicked and undone and changed. I think we need to just accept that there's going to need to be some work. Then you need to be thinking about the sort of coping strategy. So it's sort of recognizing that this is happening, recognizing the foods that you might lean into or overeat or overdrink, and actually what's going on for you. Are they foods that aren't really the foods that you want to have around, so that when you're in that state of emotional overwhelm, that you actually have got something healthy that you can swap to? That sounds so simple, and we really know it's not. So think about journaling. Like, emotional regulation can come from recognizing boundaries, maybe thinking about stepping into some sort of therapeutic relationship somewhere. Journaling can be a great first start. Maggie, you might want to chip in. And also thinking about support systems, because they're really important. Maybe having a community of people around you. Is there someone safe in your world that you can trust, who you can lean on and you can do some self-care with, and just talk these issues through? Maybe sort of like a sort of buddy system where other people are in a similar position to you. We all have things in life that we need support with. So it's about co-support as well. Coaching can help. Practicing self-compassion can be really important. And then thinking about those whole mindful eating strategies, which we talk about in our other webinars. So do come along to those, or do come along or listen to the replays if that's relevant for you. It really is just about thinking about what you can do, hitting that pause button. Even if you can put in a break between having that emotion that's absolutely overwhelming to you, and just having a pause and actually taking that second to think, okay, do I want to eat this? Or am I actually dealing with stress here? And would I be better off taking 10 minutes and going outside and getting some fresh air first? And if I really want it at the end of 10 minutes, how much do I want? And what am I going to do about that? Because sometimes we can just put in a little pause and a little break in that whole process. It can make a huge difference. And it's about changing really your relationship with food, and really getting away from that focus on the scales, because that can in itself become one of those triggering factors. We've talked about this in other webinars, but not in this context, that people feel that they get derailed if they get on the scales and they don't see the number they want to see. So again, that can be for many people quite a big emotional trigger. And I think we forget that actually health is so much more than the number on the scales. It's about your vitality when you wake up in the morning. It's about whether you're sleeping well at night. It's about how you're managing your stress. It's about if you're managing to move your body. It's all of those things that come together. So it's not underplaying or thinking that this is simple. But Mega, I'd really like to bring you in on this as well.
I think a really, really key thing you said is self-compassion, being kind to yourself. First of all, recognizing, this is what I do, this is what's happened. And I really am so inspired by the stories in the chat. Thank you so much for those that have been honest and open, you know. And the person on this chat that said in their 60 they recognized it. There's no age limit, there isn't, and it's just the fact recognizing is the key. And I think that when I talked through the cycle, and I talked about briefly about the all or nothing, when we recognize something, I want to change it, and all the things that you said, Ruth, about having a pause, taking a moment. But we're all human. Sometimes it is just you have a blip, and something happens and that makes you fall off trigger. That can happen. That's fine. It's just how you pick yourself back up, isn't it? And using the support around you, as you mentioned, a buddy or a journal, or having like points, keeping a diary that when X happens, I want to do this. What do you want to be when you're not feeling stressed, when you're feeling calm? Write down, when I have a stressful reaction, this is how I would like to deal with it, and use that as a reference tool. But know that we're human and we may fail, and that's not something to beat yourself up about it. And shame kind of grows in silence, and I think talking about it, and whether that's with your friends, or I'm sure if you talk to your friends, you'll realize more people are feeling the same thing. Um, so I think that the points you said are very valid, and hopefully will help a lot of people.
Yeah, and that brings us nicely into this whole practicing this self-compassion. I don't know if you want to talk about this, and then I'll
Mm.
in with anything relevant, but I think you've covered some of the key point.
Absolutely. I think understanding that we are human, if you're on this webinar, if you're on any sort of self-improvement journey, weight loss, trying to improve your mind, doing more exercise, eating for mindfully, uh, you want to feel better. So talk to yourself like you would a close friend. I think that's so difficult. We can be so harsh on ourselves, especially when these are sort of learned thoughts and behaviors that go in your mind and cycles. And I think it's being sometimes saying it out loud. I've had patients say it out, I tell them to say it out loud, and they're shocked as to the thoughts that they're thinking about themselves. Progress over perfection. This is a journey that we're going on. This is for life. We don't want to sort of, you know, be perfect for X amount of time and that's it. And I said, we're not robots, we're human, we're going to fail. And being kind to yourself doesn't make you slip, it helps you stay on track. I think it's the mainstay and the crux of every patient on a weight loss journey. I think you're doing something to improve your life, your well-being. That should be commended, and it's a journey, hopefully for the rest of your life. And you have to be your own best friend in this journey. You have to really, really be kind to yourself, and you're going to have failures and you're going to have successes, and kind of being there for yourself is really, really important.
Yeah, such a thing, isn't it? It's so important. Maybe learning to talk to yourself like you would to a really good friend, almost treating yourself like your own best friend, I think is just for me, it's such an important thing that we aren't really taught, I don't think, self-compassion as children, or we certainly weren't in my generation. And I don't know that that is something that's consistently considered. And I think it's such an important point because we're so good at sort of berating ourselves when we get things wrong that it just triggers that whole journey off as well, doesn't it? If we're somebody who leans into food to emotionally calm ourselves down, if we're telling ourselves we're useless or we failed or we're no good, then guess what's going to happen? We're going to eat something that we probably would prefer not to have eaten. So we really do need to watch what we say to ourselves, I think, as well.
Mhm.
I think it's really important. So, Mega, this is really
Mhm.
important, and we thought we should really bring this to everyone's attention today because there will be some of you who are really struggling with this. So, we want you to think about if this might be relevant for you to be reaching out for some additional help.
Okay, so I can see a couple of comments on eating disorders, and I think I want to emphasize that emotional eating can be a risk factor. However, emotional eating it can vary, whether it's a few episodes or not. Emotional eating doesn't mean that you have an eating disorder. People with eating disorders usually have emotional eating as part of their disorders. But how do we recognize, hang on, I might need to see a GP or something else might be going on. So the frequency of binge episodes, how often are you finding that overeating or emotional eating is happening for you? Is there something that, when stressful events happen, it's kind of like a reaction, or is this a daily occurrence, more than daily occurrence? Uh, is this the frequency becoming more and more? Eating in secret or hiding food. I know we've spoken about, this is usually something we do in isolation, and most people, if you're emotional, you deal with it yourself. However, if you do find that you are hoarding food, buying food at certain hours when you know it's going to be dark, or knowing that no one's going to be around, and therefore this is when I'm going to do my eating, to know, if you find yourself that this is specifically what you're doing, extreme guilt or shame after eating. I think this is quite difficult to quantify, but the level of distress is really key here. And this is where the patients tell me. I think guilt is part of the cycle that I mentioned earlier. However, how distressing is this for you? Is this something that is kind of dwelling and going on and leading to more and more binges, which leads to the first point, frequent binging episodes? Is this cycle happening more and more? Is the level of guilt and this distress it's happening to your mental health kind of taking over? avoiding meals with others, kind of linking into the eating in secret. Um, I have patients who say that when they're around others, sort of don't tend to eat as much, but then would sort of binge in private. Um, do you find yourself avoiding eating around others? Is that triggering for you? Is that causing you stress or guilt or shame? Obsession with food or weight? Again, extremely difficult to quantify. However, you know, patients on a weight loss journey, you're going to be thinking about your weight. We ask you to weigh yourself. We ask you to measure yourself. You're looking at a number. You're paying medication. If you're paying medication, if you're paying for a medication, I mean, so that's a financial thing there. However, it shouldn't be something that is taking over your day-to-day life, your relationships, your job, your personal life. Are you able to keep up with your hobbies? Are you able to live your life, go to work, find joy in other things? Or do you find yourself just overridden and obsessed with your body image, your food, your weight? What level is this distressing to you? And it's really useful to write these things down and monitor it. And if you are finding, there are resources that we will share, but if you are finding that this is taking over, I would advise that we would, as part of this webinar, advise that you seek further help. And I know Ruth's put the Beat eating disorders link. It's a massively helpful resource out there and a great website. If you think that there's something else going on, there's lots of resources and quizzes and things that you can do there to see if this is more than an emotional response, an emotional eating, whether there is a clinical undiagnosed eating disorder underlying there, which you may need further help for.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Thank you so much. Yes, I've just shared the Beat Eating Disorders link there. We've shared this particular link just because we agreed this would be somewhere we would be happy to signpost people to if they did want to find out more information. Thank you so much for all the sharing. A lot of it has come through to us individually as hosts, so obviously it's not appropriate for us to share that, but I can see from what a lot of you are saying is that this is a very this has been quite an interestingly, perhaps helpful webinar in many ways to bring your attention to what can be quite a difficult subject and something that obviously has affected a lot of you very personally. So thank you so much for the sharing that you are giving us too. It's really helpful to hear from you and helps us realise that actually this is something that is important for us to bring and to talk about. On a completely different note, I just want to quickly check in and ask you all if where you are on your weight loss journeys. We're looking at supporting people as well who are in that weight loss maintenance. And again, this really applies to people who are in that maintenance journey. So we'd love to hear from you where you are on that journey. And I think I have just shared a link. So thank you so much. And we are now going to stop sharing the slides and we are going to come to your questions, which we have quite a few of. We will do our best to answer your questions. And thank you so much. And there's lots of people who are sharing with everyone, so thank you as well. We will try and pick up from the chat box. I think there's a couple of questions in there. Somebody asked just now, can weight loss medication gloss, I think what you mean is gloss over emotional eating triggers? That's an interesting question. So we might pick up on that. Any thoughts about that, Mega?
Um, I think to sort of a high level, no, because I mean, in terms of we're talking about GLP-1s, the injections, the sort of you feel full, you feel satiated. The people talk about this food noise, which is dulled down. However, you still, if there is if there is disordered eating there, in my experience, that there is still an element there, and without therapy and without psychological input, it does still creep in, and we do find patients seek that sort of comfort that they can get, and they miss that from the GLP-1 sort of blocking it. So people kind of eat through the suppression. But in short, no. So please just as I said, keep a diary of your symptoms. If you find that you're getting distressed and thinking about it despite being on the medication, then discuss this with the GP. But if there is an undiagnosed eating disorder there, in my experience, the the GLP won't just simply floss over, as you said.
Yeah. So somebody is saying, thanks for that, Mega. So if emotions can affect the food choices we make, how can the food we eat affect our emotions? Well, we know that food can have quite a direct impact on our brain chemistry and how we eat. And just thinking in a way of eating in a way that sort of balances your blood sugar is really number one first step. So that is making sure that you're eating those fiber-rich fruits and vegetables, choosing the lower sugar fruits and vegetables. So Julia, if you don't mind sharing the sort of um, core meal plan and also the GLP-1 eating plan, that would be really helpful. Maybe also the Mediterranean, because really we want you to be thinking if you are in this situation, maybe actually also feeding your brain lots of healthy fats would be something that can also be another possible positive step in the right direction. So Julia, if you don't mind sharing those. Um, Actually, how we feed our brain, maybe making sure that we're eating those foods that can boost serotonin and tryptophan. So again, they're the protein-rich foods, but things like turkey, pumpkin seeds, for example, are good sources of tryptophan. I'm sure there are others, but I'll just try and think about those for a minute and come up with some more if that's helpful for you. But actually, mood-boosting foods. Cottage cheese is another one that's just come into my head. So it's just thinking, okay, how can I create plates of food that are going to support my emotional well-being as well? So those are the key things. Have a look at the how to eat and the when to eat webinars, because they are really helpful, just in terms of those basic principles, which is where you want to start. So let's move over to this really big question. Now, can you see the Q&A box? Would you like me to read it for you? Read some out, Mega?
Which one do you want me to?
Should we go to the top one? So somebody's saying, how do you relearn to
Yeah,
trust
shall I read it out? So,
your food?
how do you relearn to trust yourself after years of emotional eating and not being able to trust your brain and impulses? And in brackets, they've put, I learnt my brain and thoughts lie to me. And how do you keep your energy up when in managing the triggers? I find it is a 24/7 job and I get relief for a short time before I need to mitigate again. It is exhausting. I mean, I have full compassion for this person, and I mean, it is exhausting. It feels like you're constantly thinking about it. I just want to say, in terms of the comment here, finding it about 24/7 exhaustion, learning. Please write this down. And as I mentioned in my last slide, if this is massively distressing for you, then do look at the resources and speaking to your GP. However, Ruth, if you could maybe talk about learning to trust yourself, I think it's going back to backing yourself and being kind to yourself and having that compassion as well, isn't it? Because you are going to slip up, and knowing that you've got that confidence there to bring yourself back up again. I think it's hard.
I think it all starts with, actually you've really recognized where you're at. So that's absolutely important. So recognition is the first thing. And actually, the messages that we tell ourselves are also really important. So if you tell yourself that you can't overcome these thoughts and feelings, then the likelihood is that you're going to find it really difficult to. So you actually have to start changing that little message to, I find it difficult, but I can do it. And that is maybe just the tiniest first step. It's almost like giving yourself a tiny bit of permission that you can change. That sounds, I hope that doesn't sound at all patronizing. There's no patronize, there's nothing patronizing here at all for either of us. And there's absolutely no judgment. I think we all know that this is something everyone can experience at some stage or other in their life, and for some people for a very long time. And then journaling is really important. So actually just writing down your thoughts and feelings, and actually maybe making a list of the things that you could do when you have that moment when you want to eat something that you really don't want to eat, if that makes sense. And actually having some alternative activities. So it could be phoning a friend, going for a quick walk, maybe going up and down your stairs twice, um, doing some hoovering, drinking a glass of water. There are so many things that we can do instead. Doing some squats, getting our bodies to actually work for us differently, doing some arm press ups against the wall. It sounds really ridiculous, but if we change when we have that trigger to doing something different, then that can be a really helpful first step. And even if you manage that once tomorrow and you haven't done it before, then that's absolutely brilliant because, that's the first step. And when you've made that first step, really congratulate yourself, really pat yourself on the back because actually just one little step, getting it right once in a day is perfect. And then the next day, you can say, right, I'm going to try and do this twice tomorrow, and it's just about really being kind to yourself. What would you say to your best friend? You'd say, well done, wouldn't you? You'd say, that's brilliant. And that's what we've got to learn to say to ourselves. So I think that is where I would say to start, and that's sort of self-compassion. Would you agree with that, Mega? Anything you'd want?
I couldn't agree more, absolutely. And yeah, I
Yeah.
think we've said it all there.
Okay, so somebody said, thank you so much. This represents me, although I'm aware of it for many years. Changing it is so tricky. However, I really want to work on it. Thank you. We know that this is tricky. We're human too, and we are not perfect by any means of the equation either. And so we know that this is tricky, and this is why we think it's such an important subject to talk about. And I think from all of the responses we've had today, it clearly is. So, again, just work on it. Just take it one step at a time and recognize the steps you're taking. And even making that commitment to make a change is a huge step. The recognition, the commitment to wanting to change, the doing one little thing, it's brilliant. So I think don't undermine that at all. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you said aware for years. This is a bit learned behavior for years. So it might take, uh, hopefully not just as long, but a long time to sort of
Yeah,
adjust
in
that.
that sort of lifestyle medicine world that I work in as well, we say for every year that we've experienced a problem, our recommendation is that it might take a month to rectify that problem. So if this has been something that's been going on for 6 years, give it a good 6 months. If it's been longer than that, give it longer. Don't, to recircuit our sort of brain circuitry, our neuroplasticity in our brain can be really tough and really hard. And our brain is actually, I've learned over the last few years how lazy our brain is. It just wants to default back to the thing that gives it that quick fix as quickly as possible. So it wants ease. It is lazy. We have to retrain it. We can make our brain stronger. We can help these pathways become stronger by practicing. So that's why we practice and we congratulate ourselves. That gives us that dopamine burst, and that will help it become something that we repeat. So you have to repeat, repeat, repeat until it becomes a default behavior, I'd say. Yeah. Maggie, you're nodding. Serious.
100%.
I think you're with me. Mega, a really important question.
100. I could not agree more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a difference or a link?
Is so the next one, should we say, is there a
Yeah.
difference?
Go. You go.
Yes. So yes, emotional eating is a common, it's a response. That does not mean you have an eating disorder. However, as I said, those with eating disorders can use emotional eating is a very sort of common part of their condition. The things to look out for is what that last slide I mentioned. Write it down. What is the level of distress this is giving you? What is the frequency of these emotional eating episodes? How is this impacting you? The level of guilt you're having, your mood, your anxiety levels, your sleep. How is this taking over completely? Is this a reaction? Despite doing the techniques that myself and Ruth have talked about, is it getting better? Is it something that's persisting? Are you in this sort of cycle? And look at the sort of eating disorder resources that we mentioned and speak to your GP. But yes, there is, if you are emotionally eating, That is a response, that is a stress reaction. That does not mean you have an eating disorder.
Yeah, I mean, there is a term that I've become aware of, which is disordered eating.
Mhm.
Disordered eating is what we're describing here, I think, which sort of like is the bit on the journey that could become an eating disorder. I mean, it is a possibility, but not everybody who has disordered eating has an eating disorder. It is just learnt behavior that, that for whatever reason is a prop in your life that gives you something that you need. So maybe you need to also ask yourself, what is it that's missing? Am I really unhappy? Am I always unhappy? Is it 2 o'clock in the afternoon and I'm always having this dip? Is it 9 o'clock in the evening? Actually, I'm really exhausted, and what I need to do is actually think about getting ready for bed. But instead, I turn to something because I need to keep working for another 3 hours. Or, actually, patterns of behavior are really helpful for us to begin to recognize, because then when we start unpicking, we might realize that actually there are certain foods that we eat that if we eat them at a certain time of day or at any time of day will lead us to perhaps craving something that we really don't want to eat. And it's about just being honest with ourselves and unpicking in our own time and in a way that we can cope with, because this can become also another thing to cope with and can be overwhelming. So it's about opening the door on the allow the sort of Pandora's box in a way that works for you as well, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So somebody's put a comment that they're 74 and have realized that they've been conditioned to clean their plate since they were a baby in the 1950s. And that's such a really helpful point. Some of this is conditioned behavior. I think that's really key. If you,
Ritual I mentioned, isn't it? It's the thing
uh,
in your mind that's like, this is what we have to do.
yeah. Um, Somebody is saying that they've put on quite a lot of weight since they came off weight loss medication earlier this year and notice your appetite feels as if it's out of control and you cannot afford injections anymore. This is fine. It's fine. It's okay. I think a lot of people will be feeling similarly to you. Mega, we'll go into this, I think, in a bit of detail, won't we? Because I think when you've been on any weight loss journey, one of the things that happens to anyone, no matter how they've been on that weight loss journey, if you've lost weight, your body will want to protect you. So the protection mechanism is to get you back to the weight that you were before, because we're very primitive actually as physical beings. So our body wants to get us back to that sort of previous set point. So one of the things that we will find on any weight loss journey, and it's true for the GLP-1 medication as well, is that we'll have an increase in our hunger. That's just part and parcel of stopping any weight loss journey. So we have to be prepared and we have to learn to eat the foods that are going to satisfy us. And those are the protein rich foods, the fiber rich foods, and the making sure that we're properly hydrated, because a lot of people don't hydrate well enough and actually can get confused as to whether they're hungry or actually feel hunger when they're actually their body needs some water or some sort of fluid. So that's not undermining it, but I think come along to the webinars if you can. We're here most Mondays, nearly every Monday, and we will walk you through the journey. All of the webinars have different topics. The reason we have so many different topics is because, as we said right at the beginning, a weight loss journey is about you and it's about finding the areas of your life which are perhaps out of balance and preventing you from feeling like amazing and sort of waking up in the morning with that zest for life. And that's what we want for everyone. So, whether it's stress, whether it's emotional eating, whether it's sleep, it could be a combination of poor sleep, a lot of stress, and emotional eating. Those things often go hand in hand, don't they? So, work your way through with us, and hopefully, we will help you. Anything you want to add to that, Mega,
I
about the
mean, I just want to end on saying I've certainly found it really enlightening and great conversation. The more we can speak about this, the better. I hope that whoever was here will speak to a friend and a colleague or somebody else that you probably will find is suffering from this as well. And let's talk about it. Let's break the shame. let's help ourselves, be kind to ourselves, to better ourselves, and end the year on a high and keep going.
Yeah. And somebody's raised the issue of, thank you, Mega. Somebody's raised the issue of it being almost like a form of self-sabotage. And for some people, that's true, isn't it? I would say, do you want to
I
comment?
think that's where yeah, and that's where the guilt comes in as well, in terms of knowing that this is something that is not good for you. This is a behavior which may give you that immediate, reaction, that dopamine hit. You feel good, but then you feel bad. So you know this is some journey. It's not good for your mental health journey, your stress reaction journey. Your progress may feel stalled. And yeah, it's a form of self-sabotage that you feel you've engaged in. I think this is where taking stock after, writing down, journaling, speaking to yourself, writing a voice note, and just saying, this is how I feel. Next time, I'm going to do better. And kind of not seeing this as oh, this is just how it is now. I've done it once, I'm back on it. No, no, we're going to restart. We're going to be kind. We're going to go back to our list and we're going to do it again. Um, and and yeah, don't let the quietness and the shame and the let it fester and become more than what it is.
Yeah, very much. It's really helpful advice. Thank you. I think it is really helpful to think about this and to make notes. I think you're very strong on this, making notes and recognizing those patterns, Mega. I think that's such a key.
And I think when I find it useful to go back and see what I have written, because I'm like, that was my state of mind at that time. And even I had patient who's doing voice notes to themselves, and they're like, I don't recognize that person. Or when they're like, okay, I want to behave in a certain way. And I think rather than reading somebody else's thing, because I feel sometimes it feels like, oh, I know this. When you look at your note saying, I want to do X, Y, Z when I'm in a stressful reaction, I think it's massively powerful when you go back, when you might be feeling in a distressed state, you're looking at notes that you've made when maybe when you were calmer and you were focused, and that kind of helps, hopefully will help you regulate yourself in that moment.
Yeah, okay, very good. Okay, so somebody is saying struggling with cravings when they're getting a migraine. What can we do about cravings? So I often find cravings are linked to poor blood sugar regulation. So you want to really nail that core meal plan. Try and eat, if you're somebody who in the long term, what we would love for everyone to be able to do is just to eat 2 or 3 times a day and to feel so satisfied that you don't need to eat in between. You're not going to have cravings. That's your long term goal. In the middle of that, there's a whole journey to go along. So it may be that you need to put in some really mindful snacks. So really think about balancing your blood sugar with those snacks. Have some fruit with some nuts. Have some hummus with some celery. Have some oatcakes with some nut butter. Have a hard-boiled egg. Have some, whatever you enjoy, but try and make it a sort of protein-rich snack that's going to really help in terms of balancing your blood sugar. That can really help to cut down the number of cravings you're experiencing. There's also some really interesting suggestion for some people that migraines can be around electrolyte imbalances. So, make sure that you are actually hydrated properly. That can really help. There's a really interesting book, so it's worth having a look at that and seeing. I haven't got a link for you, but I can try and find one for a future webinar. And that again, it's just another layer. If it's something that you're really finding difficult to get on top of, it's worth having a look at all of the various things that can potentially be a factor for you. How I know that emotional eats so injections have really helped. However, the desire for sweets, chocolate, crisps, etc., hasn't stopped. And I find myself eating unhealthy stuff and not eating nutritionally and feeling full. What should I do? That's You're probably not alone, and thank you for asking that. It's again, it might be as you were saying, Megan. Do you think this could be a learned behavior that you've learned to eat those foods?
Learn behavior, you're craving that dopamine hit, that familiar feeling, that familiar sensation. And also, I mean, these foods are made to be delicious. They are the sweet, salty, like flavors. They invoke so much emotion that is a comforting, positive emotion. And this goes deep, from childhood. And so absolutely, even you decide to do something, but these subconscious learned behaviors are there, and it takes, as you mentioned, the time it takes to sort of correct those. Um, and as we mentioned before, Ruth, in previous conversations, like we have to eat to survive, and it's not as if you can just completely
Up out
stop. There's
smoking.
food available everywhere. You go 30 seconds down the road, there's shops, and it's so readily available. It's such a test of your yourself to not sort of indulge in these deliciously sprightly colored, delicious looking things. And it's just out there all the time. So I think just being aware of that and being like, you know what, it's not a failure on ourselves. If we wanted to, 30 seconds down the road, you go and you've got access to everything. So I think it's massively difficult.
Yeah, what if you're too exhausted to cook? We'll take this as a last. Just prepare in advance. Maybe do some batch cooking at weekends. Set yourself up on a day off to succeed. I know that sounds very simple and glib. But eating nuts while losing weight, is that counterintuitive or is that okay? It's actually okay as long as you don't eat huge quantities. They've got really healthy fats in. Avocados, again, really high in calories. Great, really great for our brain. Really nice, healthy fats. Oily fish as well. So, yeah, do have a look at the food guides that we have created especially for you. And we do have a plant-based guide as well if anybody would prefer that. Somebody's asked a question about the link between medications and thyroid problems. Please do ask your medication provider. We will post you to go and ask that. And if that's the Boots Online doctor service, please just send a message on the patient messaging system. So, Mega, we're going to bring the webinar to a close now, but I just want to thank you so much for giving us your time today and bringing this subject to our webinar attendees. It's been really, really fantastic. So thank you from me, and we've loved having you here. So thank you for your brilliance. Really hope everyone has found it helpful.
Thank you. I could talk about this all day, and I really hope that it's been helpful.
Yeah, definitely. If we've found it helpful, we will repeat it in a few months' time because we know that this isn't something you can listen to once, but also we will send out a link to the recording. So thank you so much for everyone who's been here today and for your time and for giving up your lunch breaks too. We know that that takes a lot of commitment, so we really appreciate you being here. Take care, have a great week, and we will be back next week. And we're talking about perimenopause and menopause and weight loss around those subjects. But please do come along if it's relevant for you. Take care, everyone.